You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to The Lion King Reviewed, the latest episode on the ThunderQuack Podcast Network for all the biggest movies that are coming out this summer. And my name is Tim Geraci from Star Wars The Saga Continues, and joining me on this episode is the main host from Star Wars The Saga Continues, Kyle Avery. Kyle, we're flipping the script, as you said before we started recording, where I'll be the main host on this one, and you'll be, my co-pilot, which isn't always the case on Star Wars The Saga Continues.
Yeah, it'll be a fun little role reversal and fun little change of pace for us because, like you said, we talk all the time, but it's pretty much always Star Wars. And we do a Star Wars podcast, but we rarely, ever record anything together talking about something else. So it'll be fun to just do a movie review for, Disney movies and 90s nostalgia and all that fun non-Star Wars related stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to this one because Lion King was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I'm going into 2019, so should be a fun discussion and talk about if it lived up to those expectations. But I guess before we fully get started on our discussion for it, as you guys know, by our new format with these reviewed episodes, we like to give our initial thoughts on the movie before we go into full-on spoiler discussions and details about what happens. But really, for this one, if you've seen the 1994 animated classic of The Lion King, the spoiler warning probably shouldn't apply too much because there's really not much different from what you've seen in the animated classic and this new remake. I got to catch myself on saying live action remake because even though it looks very lifelike, it's still technically animated. But
it's live action-ish.
Yes.
In the style of live action.
Lifelike, I guess we should say. The lifelike remake.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, so still, before we get into some, I guess, specific discussions, we'll just give our initial thoughts on it. But I actually, to start off, Kyle, I wanted to ask you first, what is your, I guess, history with the original Lion King movie that came out in 1994, as far as growing up with it and how it ranks as far as one of the Disney animated movies? So what's your history with the original movie?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I grew up with it very prominently in my household, just as I'm sure a lot of other 90s kids did. I was 3, I guess, when it came out in 94, which feels weird because I remember watching it a lot when I was like 4, 5, 6. But yeah, I mean, we obviously, I think I might have like a vague memory of seeing it in the movie theater. I'm not sure. But we had it on VHS. We watched it all the time. My sister and I, we watched it all the time. We quoted it. We had the CD that we would listen to in the car all the time as a family, and we would all sing along to all the songs and stuff. So I know the original very, very well. Probably haven't watched it in a few years at this point. I don't remember when the last time is that I watched it, but still very familiar with it. I can quote a lot of it. I can sing a lot of it. And it's just, something that was very deeply ingrained in my childhood.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way, and I was fortunate enough to grow up right and to be the perfect age of the midst of the Disney Renaissance era for their animated movies, starting with The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and I think Lion King being the pinnacle of that era. I always go back and forth on which one's my favorite, The Lion King or Aladdin, but sometimes just for how well made and how beautifully animated it looks, The Lion King just might get the edge just over Aladdin, but I love them both. And like you said, growing up with it, quoting it, the soundtrack. Instead, I didn't have the CD, I had the audio cassette, which was played on a lot of car rides and like family vacations and stuff like that. But just like you, just kind of memorize it and just watch it a lot, especially when it came out on VHS, which back in those days, it took forever for movies to come out on VHS after they were released theatrically. And once it did, I'd watch it all the time. So I have great memories of The Lion King, and it holds up really extremely well, I should say, today. I watched it maybe about a year ago, and it's just as good as ever. I don't think it's a timeless movie. It'll never be something that feels dated or doesn't hold up. It's just that great. So yeah, which, one of the reasons why it made me really excited for this remake, because, I think Jon Favreau proved himself with the Jungle Book of how well he could do a movie that features, talking animals and be animated in a lifelike way. And, that set the stage for Lion King 2 be done. And then once I just saw that first trailer, that teaser that came out, I believe on Thanksgiving weekend in 2018, when we got our first look, and I was just blown away by it immediately. I just couldn't wait to see it. So, and I guess another thing I wanted to ask you too, because I don't think we ever talked about this. What's your opinion overall of these Disney live action remakes? Because I know there's a lot of, split opinions about it. Some people love them. Some people think, that's something pointless that Disney's doing. They're unneeded. They're messing with classics. Why do that? So what's your stance on just the overall idea of Disney redoing their animated classics?
Yeah, I'm maybe not as opinionated about it as some people. Like, I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I haven't seen all of them so far. I haven't seen Cinderella, and I haven't seen The Jungle Book. And I haven't seen Maleficent. I don't know how much that's like a direct remake of Sleeping Beauty, as much of like a kind of spin-off or different take on it.
It's really a retelling. that one out of all of them is the most different, I feel. And strangely enough, that's probably my least favorite of all the live action remakes, just because to me, I felt they made Maleficent more of a hero character than the villain that she's supposed to be by the time it was over. So
yeah, and obviously, I mean, the story is from her perspective, so they're going to make her kind of the hero of her own story.
Yeah.
But so I get, unless I'm forgetting any, I think maybe the only one that I've seen is Beauty and the Beast. And I thought that was pretty good. I mean, it didn't like blow me away, but I thought it was entertaining. And I'm not super familiar with the original one. Like, I've seen it, but that wasn't one that I grew up on and like watched a ton as a kid, and so it wasn't one that I had sort of a deep investment in, and I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be so mad if they mess this up, or I didn't have like super high expectations for it. And I also haven't seen Aladdin yet, and I do want to see that one, because that's another one that I grew up with as a kid and watched a lot. Like, that was right up there with The Lion King as far as Disney movies that defined my childhood.
I enjoyed Aladdin too. I thought they did a good job for the most part on it. See, my biggest thing with the live action remakes that doesn't always work for me is that once they get to the songs aspects that are animated classics, it doesn't translate well, I think, sometimes in live action. Some do and some don't, because I feel that sometimes it transforms the movie into, like a Broadway musical, so to speak, where it's like so theatrical and things get a little over the top, trying to recreate those moments that work in animation, but not necessarily in live action when it comes to those songs. So, but when we get to Lion King, I'll mention that again to give a different take maybe on that. But that's kind of my biggest thing with the live action remakes, where I've actually enjoyed them for the most part. I think I've seen all of them. Yeah, I did see all of them. And for the most part, with Maleficent and probably Alice in Wonderland, those two are the ones that are probably my least favorites. But the reason why I don't feel like, it's such a bad thing that Disney's doing this is because they're just classic fairy tale stories that have been told in different ways many times, whether it's animated or just in publishing form being retold and get different variations. So to me, this is just another way that these classic stories are being told, and the technology is there for what works so well in animation could be done in live action, just to give another perspective and take on these classic stories. And, just with that Disney flair that made the animated ones, they did such classics. So I'm good with them. Again, some of them are, hit and miss, but for the most part, I do like the idea that Disney is trying this. And, Lion King, I know, was probably just going into it before it was released. I kept seeing a lot on social media and the different YouTube videos about, oh, this is the one Disney can't mess up because it's such a classic and it has been part of our childhood. So they got to nail this one. So I guess we'll get into our general impressions of it right away. So what'd you think, Kyle, after it was over?
I had very mixed opinions on it. There were things that I absolutely loved. Like I feel like the whole first half hour of the movie, I just had this huge grin on my face. And especially like the opening 5 minutes or so, like the Circle of Life sequence was fantastic. And I went and saw it with my parents, and I leaned over to my dad after, the first 5 minutes, like after, they do the whole Circle of Life, and then it cuts to the Lion King title at the end, just like it does in the animated version. And I went, well, that was worth the price of the tickets right there. That was just, I mean, it was so beautifully done. The music was great, and right off the bat, like the visual kind of splendor of it was on full display, seeing, all the animals and all the scenery, and just, they really just knocked it out of the park. But it was also just that initial sort of wave of nostalgia. Especially for me, like with this being a movie that I grew up on, but then also, not having seen it in a while. And just seeing that on the big screen, like I know this is sort of a new interpretation of it, and it's a different animation style and all that, but I mean, so much of it was recreated just shot for shot, and so it was like seeing something new, but then also seeing something so familiar and so, like I said, integral to my childhood. Like I couldn't help but just have a big smile on my face, like, oh, I'm back to being like 4 years old again, dancing to Hakuna Matata at my aunt's wedding. And I had a few more moments like that throughout the movie, like during the Hakuna Matata sequence. I mean, that was another one that was just so much fun. And there were a few other moments that really either just nailed sort of the nostalgia or just sort of that Disney magic kind of feeling. But then there were other times where it did feel like just sort of like the middle parts of the movie did kind of fall into feeling just sort of like a formulaic, like, okay, now it's just like beat for beat, like a remake. And, they changed some stuff. There were some things that they cut out from the original that I'll kind of go into more detail on once we get into talking about like specific plot points and stuff. But, there were some things they took out, some things they added in. But for the most part, it was, I mean, it's the exact same story. So, just kind of getting to those middle parts, it was like, okay, well, this is, it's not the most exciting stuff. And so you're seeing it in live action, but it's kind of like been there, done that. And was, again, just kind of, I don't know if saying they've played it safe is the right word, but it's like once that initial sort of feeling of nostalgia and stuff wore off, it was like, I don't know. It's hard to describe the feeling of it, but there were some parts where I just like wasn't super impressed. And then there were some new things that they added that I thought were unnecessary. There were some parts that they took out that I loved from the original. I feel like Rafiki kind of got the short end of the stick in this one.
Yeah.
They took out some of his, and honestly, I would say, especially of all like the 90s kind of classic Disney movies, like Rafiki might be my favorite Disney character of all time. He's certainly my favorite character in The Lion King, and one of my favorite Disney characters. And so I was kind of disappointed with some of his lines and stuff that they took out. It's like they changed some lines and stuff in the dialogue, but there were definitely some that were taken straight from the original movie. But then there were some classic ones that they left out, and I'm like, well, you left in this one, but not this one. And there were certain times when some of their performances fell a little flat for me. But there were some really good ones too. I thought Chiwetel Ejiofor as Scar was fantastic.
Yeah.
I thought, it was Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen did really good as Timon and Pumbaa. Those are probably the standout performances for me. And of course, it's cool to have James Earl Jones back as Mufasa, obviously. But it was very, again, there were certain scenes and certain moments where they really nailed it, and then there were other ones where it fell short. And again, I'll talk about those when we get more into the spoilers, in case anybody hasn't seen it, or if you don't want to know exactly what kind of things they changed. But there were certain things that they kept exactly how it was in the original, except I feel the original did it better. Like there were certain emotional moments in this one that I felt lacked the same punch. And it's like, man, you spent all your time and effort making some of these other scenes really visually spectacular, but then when it came to like the emotional drama, they kind of just phoned it in. So yeah, I don't know. It was, it's up and down for me. I felt very sort of uneven on it. Because I didn't totally hate it, because there were some parts that I really loved, but I also didn't totally love it because there were some parts that fell really flat for me. So, yeah, I guess overall for me it was a mixed bag. But what did you think?
Yeah, I understand some of your criticisms that you have, and I probably share a few of them, but maybe in different aspects, which we'll get into. But overall, like I said, I had high expectations going into it, and once it was over, I felt it met them for me because going into it, I knew, especially once the reviews started coming out, that everyone's saying, it was just, a beat for beat retelling almost of the original. And I was actually okay with that because to me, the draw of this was just seeing, again, this classic story be told in a way that, we've never seen before and have it look so lifelike. And they nailed it. That's what I was going into it, wanting to experience that great story again, but having it be told and experience it like never before. And that's exactly what I got. And it's an absolutely beautiful film. I mean, Jon Favreau just, knocked it out of the park visually as far as making this seem like a truly live action. You're seeing animals that look so lifelike and they're speaking, and the effect of that was not lost on me. That's right when it started, like you mentioned, the circle of life, though there wasn't much dialogue coming from any of the characters in that opening sequence. It just took your breath away as how beautiful it looked, and seeing again these classic moments that we've only seen in animation be brought to life, even though it's still being animated in that weird way, as far as it being, so lifelike, but knowing it's still an animated film. It just was amazing. So right off the bat, it got to a great start. And I even felt that as the movie progressed and we're getting invested with the characters, especially once, we're seeing the interactions with Simba, young Simba and Mufasa, all that stuff I felt was really great. And just capturing that father and son bond that I felt the first one really captured as well. And as you were saying, it didn't capture a lot of the emotional beats as the animated one did. I agree in some aspects, but also I felt it kind of improved on it a little bit, for me anyway, in certain aspects. Having it be so lifelike, I think it upped the emotional aspect in certain scenes and areas. And one of those ones for me is when Mufasa is kind of disciplining Simba after he rescued him and Nala from the elephant graveyard. And Simba's walking up to him. They have that conversation. Mufasa tells him about, the kings and the stars being the kings of old. And they just have that great bonding moment where they're kind of playing and rolling in the field. And of course, knowing what happens later on in the movie, for anyone who's seen the original, I was thinking about that as that scene was playing out and just thinking, man, how lifelike it looks. And like you're seeing two lions, one grown and one still a cub, having this emotional bond and connection. I just felt it amplified that relationship even further for me. And I just love that. And I got that in a few other moments, and certain times it didn't work as well. But overall, as the movie progressed, I kind of agree with you, kind of in the middle, once Simba grew up and got with Timon and Pumbaa. I wouldn't say it started to drag at all, but that's something where, I don't know, like that's where I really felt the animated version did it better. And I'm probably going to be in the minority here because I know everybody was kind of saying how Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen stole the show as Timon and as Pumbaa, but they were actually kind of my least favorite, I guess, not new characterization, but new performances for these characters in the movie. And I don't think it's anything against them necessarily, but Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella, who did the voices for Timon and Pumbaa in the original, stood out so much. Were just a big aspect of why the comedy in that movie, the original one, worked so well. And their voices are so distinctive that when it came to seeing them in this one, I just felt Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen didn't capture that as much as the original one did. And the humor still worked for the most part, but not on the level that the animated one did. And yeah, so their performances, while not bad, that was the one where I kind of felt the most disappointed by, because Timon and Pumbaa were so funny and just great, sidekick characters in the original. I didn't feel quite that same way about them in this one. But by the time we got to the end and it was all over, I just felt very satisfied for what I saw in the story being told in such a lifelike manner, and just being, not only a fan of the original, but just, a lover of animals and nature in general. Just seeing a movie about animals and nature and life be told in this lifelike fashion again, that's going to be the theme of this podcast, of me saying that a lot, because that's what really stood out to me as far as this animation being so lifelike and so well done, and just seeing, like I said, animals and nature be in the story be told that way. It just really blew me away. So overall, I got a few nitpicks and complaints here and there, but I was definitely satisfied with it, and it lived up to my expectations as far as, seeing this great story be told in such a lifelike manner. So I was definitely satisfied with it. So I know we like to say if we should rank it as far as a go see it or a skip it. I'm definitely going to give it a go see it ranking here. It's something you should definitely at least check out if you're a fan of the original. Not necessarily guaranteeing you'll come away loving it just like the original, but it's an experience I think you should probably take in, because it's, again, that animation and visually it is stunning. And just to see these characters be brought to life like this in a way, it was just, to me, amazing. So I definitely think you should go see it.
Yeah, I'm a little more on the fence. I would say it kind of depends on how invested you are in it. If you want to see it, I'm not going to tell you not to, but if you don't want to see it, I'm not going to go, oh yeah, you definitely have to. Like, no, change your mind, go see it. But I guess I'll lean on a little more on the side of giving it a go see it recommendation, just because there are definitely, it has its moments for sure. Like I said, I don't regret seeing it just because the opening Circle of Life sequence was really, for me, was worth the price of admission alone. I mean, I went to a matinee, so it's not like it cost me a ton of money, but
hey, matinees are getting more expensive each day, so
that's true. That's true. But yeah. So I would say I would tentatively give it a go see it, but maybe not quite as much of an enthusiastic endorsement as you would.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I guess with our initial impressions out of the way, we can take off the spoiler-free zone now and throw that spoiler warning from here on out that if you haven't seen the live action or the lifelike remake just yet, and if you don't want to know any of the changes or minor tweaks that they made, this is the point where you might want to hold off, see it, and then hear what we have to say. So,
yeah, or if you haven't seen the original either.
That is true. So now we're going full-on spoiler talk here. And the Mufasa death still doesn't get any easier, I will say.
But see, that was one of the moments for me that was disappointing. Like, I
really?
thought, yeah, it didn't have the same emotional punch to it. Like especially the part. Now, I will say this: when Mufasa falls and when all the wildebeest run past, and then it's like the aftermath when Simba goes up to him and he's trying to wake him up and stuff. That was still really sad, like it was in the original. But when Mufasa rescues Simba and then he jumps up the side of the gorge and Scar is there, for some reason those performances felt really flat to me. Because in the original version, it's like super dramatic. Like Mufasa's like, Scar, brother, help me. And then like Scar gets right up in his ear and goes, long live the king. And, then throws him off. But in this one, it was just Mufasa was just kind of like, he's like, Scar, brother, help me. And Scar's like, long live the king, and throws him in. Like it just didn't live up. That was one of those that just didn't live up to the original for me. I was expecting more from it. And I thought even just the way that it was framed, like they could have done some more tight close-ups and stuff. Like, I know that, they're like realistic animals, and a lot of times this almost felt like watching like a nature documentary with voiceover to like tell a story, which was cool. But then like, again, in these dramatic moments, like you got to punch up that drama and that tension a little bit more. And yeah, that was one that just didn't work for me.
See, I kind of know what you're saying. Well, I'll definitely agree that the way those lines of dialogue were delivered by James Earl Jones and Chiwetel Ejiofor wasn't on the same level as the original, as with James Earl Jones' first performance in Jeremy Irons, because the way those lines were delivered there was classic and really upped up the drama of that scene. But at the same time, I don't feel it was quite flat, as you were saying. It just felt different and just not quite as impactful. So not necessarily bad, but not quite as, I guess, good as it needed to be as the original was. So I kind of agree with what you're saying there, but it didn't. The moment itself of Mufasa's death wasn't lost on me because of that, and the way the lines of dialogue were delivered there. Again, I'll probably be saying this a lot, but this is why I really like the movie so much. But just seeing, pretty much a lion right there, a lifelike lion being thrown off and just falling to his death. And then once you see that body there, and again, just being so lifelike, it still hits me and again, that's why I go back to that scene with Mufasa and Simba, that when he was teaching him the lesson and disciplining him there. Just how more impactful that one was, and in turn seeing Mufasa die later on, I felt how real the dramatic feeling and the emotional gut punch you feel once Mufasa dies in this moment too. And again, like you said, it still really gets you once you see Simba just go up to that Mufasa's dead body and just try to cuddle up with it and just say goodbye that one last time before Scar comes. It's that hit me still too. Once we got to that moment, it was just like the animated one did. So I felt for the most part that scene maybe not quite as good as the original one played out, but for the reasons that we talked about with just lines of dialogue that were delivered in that critical moment there. But everything else I thought was done really, really well. The Willoughby stampede made for, looked great in that lifelike animation, seeing that play out and Simba trying to escape and then Mufasa rescuing him. All that was great. So even though that minor little bit of complaints for me anyway, I know that was a big one for you. It was just the way they delivered those lines took away from it for a little bit, but not quite so with me. I felt they still did a great job of having that moment be impactful as it should be, even though, the stuff, the way it was delivered was a little different. So I guess we'll just be on a little different fence there as far as how that moment played out and as far as the impact it should have had. So,
yeah, I mean, I will agree with you though, when you're talking about those earlier scenes with Simba and Mufasa and like the scene where, like you said, he's disciplining him after he goes to the elephant graveyard, and then they sitting there looking up at the stars, and he's telling him about the spirits of the past kings looking down on them. That scene was fantastic. Also, even the scene where where they're sitting together like on Pride Rock, and Mufasa gives him the speech about everything the light touches will all be your kingdom one day. And then when they're walking through the grass, and he's telling him about the circle of life and how we eat the antelope, but then when we die, our bodies become the grass, and then the antelope eat the grass, and so we're all connected in the circle of life. Like, that stuff was all great. And like I said, for the first like half hour of the movie, including a lot of like the Simba Mufasa like father son stuff, I was just loving it. And part of it was because of how well done it was, and like I said, part of it was just kind of that nostalgia of being back in the story that I loved as a kid. And then it was just, it was after that when it kind of started wearing off a little bit, and then they had certain moments like Mufasa's death that made me go, that was missing something.
Yeah, but speaking of Mufasa, I mean, just so great to have James Earl Jones back. And even though we do notice the difference of delivery of certain familiar lines that we know so well by seeing the original of so many times since 1994, there's still nobody else who could do Mufasa's voice.
Oh, yeah.
A movie like this. I mean, just when he spoke again, it just brought a huge smile to my face in the first scene where he has that conversation with Scar. It's just so great that they got him back and that he was able to do it again. So the fact that James Earl Jones came back was just another win for this one for me.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, I know obviously he's older now and his voice sounds a little bit different, which we've also noticed with like his appearances in Star Wars, like when he came back and played Vader in like in Rogue One and in Rebels. But I would dare to say, I think he sounds better or like closer to the original Mufasa in this movie than he does in his recent appearances as Vader even.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I don't know if he had a cough drop that day, or if they did, some vocal processing on him or something, if it's like auto-tuned or whatever. But no, I mean, he sounded great. And like you said, of all the classic voices from the original Lion King, that's like the one that you gotta get back if you can. And honestly, I was initially disappointed that they didn't also get Jeremy Irons to voice Scar, because I think like that's such an iconic voice too. But Chiwetel Ejiofor he kind of did it a little bit differently. Like, his Scar isn't as kind of deep and menacing. He's almost a little bit more like kind of quiet and sinister. Like, he's just as menacing, but in a different kind of way. And I really liked his kind of different take on it.
Same here. He was probably the standout for me as the new cast members doing these characters. And like I said, Jeremy Irons was, after James Earl Jones, he's probably the most iconic voice in the movie that's so identifiable with Scar. But yeah, Chiwetel Ejiofor brought a new dynamic to it. I just really, really enjoy it. And the key word that you said there that I totally agree with is how sinister he was. throughout his performance. And that even applied to, the songs too, or as far as, or Be Prepared, and how it wasn't, unless, I guess I'll go into a little bit of the music in this one, how it was handled. I overall thought the songs, pretty much all of them were handled great in this one. And like I said previously, that's not always the case in these Disney live action remakes. And because I felt they didn't go over the top with them where it becomes a totally different feel to the movie, like it becomes a theatrical show or a Broadway play or something like that. It kept it within, the realms of, how the world is established already in the movie. And with Be Prepared, it was very subdued, but yeah, I think it still had the same effect that fit Chiwetel's Ejiofor's performance for Scar, where, got the point across. It was still, that catchy tune that is with Be Prepared, but just not over the top with all the, hyenas going crazy, the green flames, even though seeing the green flames would have been cool without lifelike animation. But
yeah, I think that was one of those things where, like, I was initially a little disappointed that it was so subdued, like you said. And I kind of wish they had done more with it, but then at the same time, yeah, to take it straight from the original where you've got like the hyenas marching like Nazis and, they're lit up by these jets of green fire that are shooting up. Like, it's so over the top that would have been really hard to pull off in live action.
Yeah. And another one that I probably enjoyed more in this one than the original was I Just Can't Wait to Be King, because that one gets pretty crazy in the animation where all the animals are standing on top of each other and then they all fall down. But I really liked how this one, kind of like with Circle of Life, did a great job in the beginning, just showing the great African landscape and all the animals and nature. I thought I Just Can't Wait to Be King did a good job of that too, where you got Simba and Nala mixing up with the different animals and the different baby animals that they're going along with singing the song too. And so I just really like that aspect where, again, it was held back a little bit, didn't go over the top and change the tone of the overall movie now that it feels so lifelike. But it still got the point across where, Simba and Nala are having fun, they're singing the song, and other animals are involved as well, but they're not doing all these crazy things kind of in the animated one. That works well for the animation, but it would have felt, again, like a different type of movie if they did that exactly how it was done in the animation one, when this one looks so lifelike. So I Just Can't Wait to Be King, I thought, was done really well for this type of lifelike retelling of this story. And again, just seeing that, I know it's not real, but see all those animals interacting with each other, looking so lifelike as they could be. That was one of the moments where I really thought the animation and just the feel of the movie was really impressing me.
Yeah, that was a good one. I think overall, I mean, the music overall was good. Like, it's hard to ruin those songs, but at the same time, like, I feel like all of them, they put a little bit different spin on. And because of that, it's like, okay, well, they're all good, but none of them live up to the original. Like, because all of those songs are just so classic. And I'm thinking more just from like just a musical standpoint and not necessarily like the animation that went along with it or like what the characters were doing and stuff. But like you said, I do think I Just Can't Wait to Be King was like, I mean, the song itself was good, but also the recreation of that scene was really well done. And I think they did it in a way that, like you said, translated really well to the live action, where they still had a lot of the animals and it was still a very sort of like colorful and energetic scene, but not quite as over the top. Like, when you have that one part in the animated one where all the animals are like stacked up on top of each other with, the swaying flamingos up at the top and everything, like that wouldn't have worked. They also cut out the part where at the end, the rhinoceros sits on Zazu, because, I mean, I guess that makes sense, because in real life that probably would actually kill a bird his size. Yeah, so I thought that one was really good as far as just the overall presentation of it. But, I mean, just the music overall, like, if you look at each song individually, they put kind of a new spin on it, which is nice that they didn't, like, make it a carbon copy of the original, but at the same time, when the originals are so perfect, it's like anything that you change is going to be like, okay, it's good, but it's not as good. So it was all, I mean, none of them I would say were like a letdown. It was just like, kind of a step below, but it's still all the songs that you know and love, and they're still just as fun and enjoyable to listen to.
Totally. One of the different things they did with the songs for Hakuna Matata, even though that's probably the main one where I felt the original one was so much better. Again, going back to the original performances by the original voice actors for that one, which make that song for me. So even though this new one wasn't quite on that level, but one thing change I did like was, to get to the part where Pumbaa is telling his story about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And in the animated one, Timon kind of interrupts him and he goes, "No, wait, not in front of the kids."
And I got downhearted every time that I Pumbaa, not in front of the kids.
Yeah. And in this one, Timon actually says, "I'm not going to interrupt you."
Yeah. Well, Pumbaa says, "Every time that I farted, you're not going to cut me off on that."
Yeah. That had me cracking up. So I thought that was a fun
Yeah.
little change that they did with that one.
Yeah,
So,
they had a couple moments like that where it was almost kind of self-referential in a way. Like even Timon and Pumbaa made a couple pokes about, Hakuna Matata, like, "Oh, this is our song," and everybody's expecting us to sing it, and not in quite like a fourth wall breaking kind of way, but in a kind of like wink, wink, nod, nod, like we know you've seen this before kind of way.
yeah, totally. And even it's weird because one of the things, or one of my complaints about it goes back to Timon and Pumbaa. I guess one of my biggest issues with this movie, believe it or not. But they added some stuff to their time with Simba here. Like, I know that time they're going where they're talking about the circle of life, and they're saying or they view it more as a straight line type of path with how they view life. So we got a few extra stuff with Simba and Timon and Pumbaa in this movie, but I just felt, I don't know if it felt rushed or whatnot, but I didn't feel that strong friendship bond that I did between Simba, Timon, and Pumbaa in this one that the original one had. Even though probably if you were to watch them again, there's more in this remake than the original. Like I said, it seemed like they added a few stuff to their relationship here, or a few scenes here and there. But for whatever reason, again, maybe just going back to the performances where it didn't, capture the way the original ones did for me, that kind of held it back a little bit. Because once Simba leaves and Simba goes back to Pride Rock and Timon and Pumbaa follow him, you're supposed to feel that great feeling. Yeah, they are good friends already for the time they spent together. But in this one, it didn't quite have that effect on me like the original one did once they came back. I don't know what it is. I'm attributed to the performances. Like I said, not being as strong, in my opinion, as the original one was, where I didn't feel that strong connection between those three characters. But that was probably one of the things that held it back a little bit for me as far as that aspect of the film goes, and those three characters, because it was so strong and so great in the original. I was expecting it to be the same in this one because so many other things that I loved about the original worked so well in this new one. But this one just felt a little short for me when it came to Timon, Pumbaa, and Simba and their friendship.
See, that was one part that I think did work for me, especially like the new scenes that they added in, like when Timon and Pumbaa take Simba to their little oasis or whatever, where they're eating the bugs and stuff. They added a couple new scenes there where there's some other animals in there that have,
I did like that aspect of it.
Speaking parts. Yeah, that was fun. There's like an antelope that makes a joke about Simba not eating him or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like you said, some of those added scenes where they're talking about, the circle of life being more like a straight line, and they kind of have different views. And then when they come to help him at the end, they're like, maybe the line curves a little bit. Like, maybe this does affect all of us. And so, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like maybe the bond didn't feel quite as strong as it did in the original, but it still felt believable for me. Like that felt like a part that just an aspect of the original that even if they changed it a little bit, like it was still pretty solid for me. And I did like those performances a lot from Timon and Pumbaa. I thought Hakuna Matata was another one of the songs that I think did really work for me. Like, again, even if they changed some things in the song a little bit, I mean, the fart joke I actually thought was hilarious, but, some of the other, just the vocal stylings or whatever, they might change up a little bit. And it's like, well, okay, so it's not as great as the original, but it still works really well. But, the whole sequence where you just see, even the way that they kind of did like a little flashback scene and showed like little baby Pumbaa and, all the zebras like running away from his stench and stuff, that was really fun. And I just got a big smile on my face the way they did that transition shot where you see them walking across that log and it, you see Simba like growing up. That was really cool. So that was probably one of my favorite sequences in the movie as well. And one that I think they did really nail the feeling of. But speaking of relationships that didn't really work, and this is one that, like, as I was watching this, I was going, wait, is that how it went in the original? Because it feels like we're missing something here. When Nala shows up, when she leaves Pride Rock and she goes to find Simba when he's with Timon and Pumbaa, and they like she goes to she attacks Timon and Pumbaa. Simba jumps in to save them. They're rolling around for a bit. She pins him on the ground, and he goes, "Whoa, Nala!" And then she's like, "Oh, Simba!" And then they catch up, like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in forever. You're still alive." And then she tells him about what's going on at Pride Rock, and then they go off together. And then Timon starts singing, "I can see what's happening." And I'm like, "Wait, what? What's happening?" Like, there hasn't been any character development here between the two of them for us to start singing "Can You Feel the Love Tonight?" Like, no, I can't feel it yet. Like, they just met after not seeing each other for years. And I was like, man, I need to go back and watch the original again, because did it happen that suddenly? Because maybe it's just the fact that it's, more realistic, that I was expecting it to feel like more realistic character, relationship building or something. That felt really jarring for me for some reason. I was like, oh, we're going from, hey, how's it going? Haven't seen you in forever, to like, we're supposed to believe that there's a romantic connection between the two of them.
Yeah, I actually thought the same thing when that happened, where it's like, man, am I remembering it wrong? Because I don't think it happened this quick. Like, like you said, there's almost like no scene transition or whatsoever. They meet, they have a little conversation, then the song gets going right away. I was like, man, this is happening pretty quickly. So I do agree with you there. Another little nitpick I had about the whole "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" sequence was that the sun looks like it was just starting to go down, but it wasn't at night like the original one was. Mm-hmm. So when you hear the lyrics and you're seeing them kind of out in the daylight, this stuff's a little strange or just not quite fitting. But I do agree with you on that aspect of it, where it kind of happened a little too quick. But I did like some of the added stuff they had with Nala and the Pride, and when Scar takes over, they had those little extra moments there that gave a little backstory to Scar and Simba's mom. Oh, what's her name?
Sarabi.
Sarabi, thank you. Where, tell a little of their history about, there was a competition between Scar and Mufasa to, who would eventually become Sarabi's mate, and Sarabi chose Mufasa. And that's just another added reason that Scar probably holds a grudge against Mufasa and wanted him dead. Mm-hmm. And then also, too, how he felt he couldn't be accepted as the king of the Pride unless Sarabi became his queen. And once, and the way for them to realize that, if she would eat with him, and he's trying to get her to have that dead antelope, it looked like, for dinner. But when she refused, it's all left for the hyenas, and he makes that declaration, the hyenas will eat first, and whatever is left, it'll be just you can have after that. So that little aspect of the backstory between Scar and Sarabi, I thought was nice. And then we got that sequence of seeing Nala actually lead the Pride and try to escape without being noticed by Scar and the hyenas, I thought made for a nice, fun little suspenseful sequence there. So those little added textures and just added moments to the story, I thought worked pretty well for that. Even though it's nothing like hugely major, but it was just something new and nice to get over the course of these characters who didn't get much screen time or much development in the original.
No, I agree. I think those scenes worked really well. I mean, the scene of seeing Nala leave the Pride and having to like sneak past the hyenas and stuff, I mean, that just added a little extra dramatic tension. And like you said, they added some unexpectedly interesting like backstory for Scar. There was even a scene earlier, and I don't remember if this was in the original, but I didn't remember it being in the original. I thought this might have been something new that they added, where they kind of insinuated that the reason Scar has a scar over his eye is because he had already like challenged Mufasa and lost at some point.
I don't believe it
so
was.
I was like, yeah, I forget. It's maybe it was at the very beginning. And, maybe when, Mufasa says, like, "Don't turn your back on me, Scar." And he says, like, "Oh, I know, I already tried it once," or something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That I thought was actually, I mean, it was just a quick added line, but adds some additional context to their relationship that wasn't there before. So I thought they did a great job of fleshing out kind of Scar as a character a little bit more, and sort of his relationship with Mufasa and the dynamic of kind of their role in the Pride and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I agree. That stuff was some good additions there.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, then we're getting into the point where Simba is having that conflicting emotions about, staying with Timon and Pumbaa and then Nala trying to get him to go back and take his rightful place as king of Pride Rock and to challenge Scar. So we get another extra thing that wasn't in the original was how Rafiki finds out Simba's still alive.
This was the worst new addition that they put in here because it was so pointless.
Yeah.
So if you remember in the original, and I think this was after. No, you know what? It wasn't even when Nala shows up. It's when Simba's sitting with Timon and Pumbaa and they're looking up at the stars, and Simba he tells them what Mufasa told him, that it's, the kings of the past looking down on us, and they laugh at him and he kind of gets his feelings hurt and he goes off by himself. And then in the original one, it's something kind of magical, there's like just a breeze or whatever that goes by, and then you see this breeze. Like, I don't know if there's some dust that he kicks up or something. But essentially, the wind carries like some essence of Simba or whatever, and it flies all the way back to Pride Rock, and Rafiki, just maybe like snatches some leaves off the wind or something and sniffs them or mashes them up into his little potion or whatever and goes, "Oh, Simba's alive," and he figures it out. But in this one, they decided to make it very literal, and it gust of wind comes and blows a little clump of hair out of his mane. And then they spend like 5 minutes showing us how this piece of hair gets back to Rafiki. Like, it's blowing the hair through the wind, and then it falls in the water, and then a bird comes and snatches it out of the water and uses it to build its nest, but then the other bird in the nest tosses the hair back out, and then it falls on a leaf, and then a giraffe eats the leaf, and then, I kid you not, the giraffe poops out the hair. You see a dung beetle rolling a ball of giraffe poop with Simba's hair sticking out of it. And then it like rolls the ball of poop off a cliff and it breaks open and the hair falls back out again. And then some ants walk by and pick it up. And you see this whole line of ants that are carrying leaves and stuff. And one of them's carrying Simba's hair, and they climb up Rafiki's tree. And Rafiki snatches the hair from one of the ants. And that's how he finds out that Simba's alive. But that whole thing took like 5 minutes. And I was like, this could have been 10 seconds. Like, we get the point. The wind carries something from Simba and it goes back to Rafiki and he knows that Simba's alive. Like, that's all the point. Much time on it. And we certainly didn't need giraffe poop involved.
Yeah, that's one of the ones we're talking about sometimes where it feels like a nature documentary with how lifelike it is. That moment especially, where there's no voices and you're just seeing the animals do what they do. And yeah, I agree where it was unnecessary. And of all the stuff they added, that was something that could have been trimmed down substantially and have that extra time be used somewhere else for other characters to build on, more than seeing, like you said, a dung beetle roll giraffe poop for who knows how long before it got to Rafiki.
Now, it could have been a really funny tongue-in-cheek moment if they had like David Attenborough do voiceover for that. But, and actually make it like a nature documentary. And now the dung beetle rolls the giraffe poop down the hill. But gosh, it was like, why are we doing this? And how much longer is it going to take? Because again, if you've seen the original, you know where that hair is going. Like, you know what this scene is supposed to be. This is how Rafiki finds out Simba is alive. And like, I don't know, maybe they did this for kids that haven't seen the original movie, but it was just like, come on, guys, get it over with. We know where this is going to end up. And it's not like a hugely crucial moment.
Yeah, I mean, at first I thought, okay, the bird picks it up. It's, going to fly back to Rafiki. It'll drop it and he picks it up. I thought that was going to be the extent of it. And then once the giraffe ate it, I was like, okay, what's the point of that? Then we got the dung beetle. I was like, okay, this is where it's going, huh? So, yeah, time I don't think spent the best as far as new additions go for the movie.
Yeah, think of all the ILM or whoever did the special effects for this, all the poor animators who had to spend months working on that shot of the dung beetle rolling a ball of giraffe poop.
Had to have been probably the newest employee at ILM. Okay, this is your first job on a big movie. Here's your assignment: giraffe poop. Make it look good. But once Rafiki, finds out Simba's alive, then we get another classic moment from the original where Rafiki has this conversation with Simba, which leads to Simba having a conversation with Mufasa. And this moment was kind of hit and miss for me. I felt a lot of it worked really well, and then there were some disappointments. And this is one of the moments where I felt Rafiki was shortchanged a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He had his moments of dialogue where he's, explaining to Simba who he is, but the way he shows him or tries to tell him in the animated one was, a little bit lengthier and got the point across so much better that was missing in this moment right here, especially where he bops him on the head with his stick.
Yeah.
And, that whole aspect and, teaching wasn't in this one. It was just kind of, he was leading him towards the water so Simba can see the reflection of himself, and which was great. I loved that scene. Again, going back to how lifelike the animation was, seeing Simba, look like a lifelike lion. Then you see his reflection turn into the Mufasa. Well, all that stuff was great. And then I was getting excited knowing, what's coming next with Mufasa, being formed within the clouds and having that conversation with Simba. And it was started off really cool. You see the lightning effects amongst the clouds. You hear James Earl Jones' iconic voice. It was all really cool, but I felt, I don't know the reason why, but they didn't go all the way with it as far as having that fully formed, spiritual plane Mufasa have the clouds take shape of the lion or just his silhouette come through the clouds and start speaking to Simba like in the animated one. So I was expecting to see that. And I didn't quite get it, even though, still great performance from James Earl Jones giving that wisdom to Simba there. And again, the effects were cool seeing the lightning and the amongst the clouds, but I was hoping for a little more and for stuff we were expecting to be like the animated classic because they were following so much of what made the original movie so classic. And for certain moments like this one that they didn't go all the way was a little disappointing. So that whole sequence was a little hit and miss for me.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of okay with the way that they went with the whole Mufasa scene because, again, knowing that this is a more realistic interpretation of it, I kind of wasn't expecting them to do. I mean, I was like, well, maybe they will. Maybe there'll be a fully formed, image of Mufasa in the clouds. But I also was like, it was kind of one of those things I was almost expecting them to do differently. And so just the fact that, they didn't go all the way with it, but that you at least get those hints of it. I mean, obviously you still hear his voice and you would see those flashes of lightning in the clouds where it sort of vaguely resembled a lion. I thought was a cool way to still kind of have a little bit of that supernatural element to it, but also make it a little bit more realistic. So I was okay with that. But the Rafiki stuff that they left out, I was like, I mean, again, it's not stuff that's super important to the plot, but it's some of my favorite moments from the original. Like, first of all, he never does the Asante Sana squash banana.
Yeah,
like
true.
I mean, Rafiki still was like that wise old sage, but they took out the wackiness that makes him so much fun. It would be like if somebody remade The Empire Strikes Back, and when Luke finds Yoda on Dagobah, he's just regular Yoda, and he doesn't do like the crazy laugh and the whacking R2 with the stick and all that fun stuff that makes you think, who the heck is this guy, before you realize that he's a wise old Jedi master. So yeah, they kind of stripped Rafiki of that fun wacky side. And yeah, he doesn't have the stick in this scene, so he doesn't do the thing where he whacks Simba on the head and then he gives his whole speech about how, oh yes, the past can hurt, but you can either learn from it or run from it. Which I think is, it's again like one of those great moments from the original that's such sort of a poignant lesson that he teaches him. And I was thinking, oh, okay, well, maybe because it's realistic, they didn't want to have him, a baboon carrying like a magic staff or whatever. But then he gets it out later anyways. Like before they fight the hyenas at the end, he pulls his stick out and they make like a big deal out of it. It's like revealing Luke's lightsaber or something, and he like holds it up and goes, hello, old friend. And it's like, it's this super important thing. And I'm like, but you couldn't have him have it earlier in a scene where he was also supposed to have it. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will say the stuff like the lines and stuff that Rafiki did have, I enjoyed. I thought they did a good interpretation of that character, but I wanted them to do more with it, and I didn't like the stuff that they cut out from the original version.
Yeah, and then it just makes you think too when we're just talking about that whole sequence with the dung beetle and the giraffe. Like they had that, but they took out the stuff with Rafiki that that time could have been used for that sequence to be a little longer. So yeah.
And also the scene where Simba's chasing him through the trees, where he leads him to the water's edge, and in the original, they just did so much more with it to the point where he's kind of like that trickster character where we don't really know much about him yet at that point, and Simba's chasing him, but it's almost like a creepy kind of thing where he's like popping in and out of the trees, and you hear his voice coming from different places, and you get kind of like this really claustrophobic feel, like Simba's almost getting lost in this dense jungle before Rafiki finally leads him out the other side. Whereas again, because they're kind of playing it straight with the live action, it was a lot less kind of intense or weird, or however you want to put it. It was a lot more just kind of basic, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. So yeah, that's part of the middle aspect of the movie where I felt wasn't as strong as the beginning. But once Simba returns to Pride Rock with Nala and Timon and Pumbaa showed up, this is where I thought it kind of kicked back into gear again for me, as far as having that great feeling that watching the original does, and being totally new with the way this is so animated in the lifelike way that it is. And I couldn't wait to get to the ending sequence, because there's some great moments in the original that I couldn't wait to see be done this way and look so lifelike. And overall, this ending sequence did not disappoint for me once Simba has his showdown with Scar, except for one aspect, which I'll just get into right now. I guess before that, another different thing they changed, which got me laughing too, was how Timon and Pumbaa distract the hyenas, so Simba and Nala could get up to Pride Rock, where instead of doing the whole Timon and the hula skirt and having that song, they did a riff on Be Our Guest for Beauty and the Beast, at least the beginning of it, with Lumiere giving his introduction, and then they'd start chasing them. I thought that was a fun little nod there. But once Simba gets to Pride Rock and he has the showdown with Scar, all that stuff I thought was done great. And the performances by, again, Chiwetel Ejiofor, and then Donald Glover, who we haven't talked about much as Simba yet, but I thought overall he did a really good job as voicing Simba in this one. But the one thing that I wish was, again, done just like the animated version, is once Scar reveals to Simba that he was the one who killed Mufasa, and Simba's falling or about to fall off Pride Rock, is in the same position as Mufasa was. Once Scar tells him and Simba has that flashback, all that's done great, and seeing Simba's reaction, and I love how he just scratches Scar in the face and to get himself back up onto the Pride Rock there. But the one change I didn't like is how he didn't have Scar pinned down like he did in the animated one, just showing his dominance over him, and just how that anger he felt once he learned that Scar killed Mufasa, and just the strength he's showing there, and Scar still, is not giving in, but then Simba just grips on, makes his grip tighter on his neck to make Scar tell the truth. I really loved how that was done in the animated, or the original animated version, and wish it was done this way. It just didn't felt, the need for Scar to admit it, or for the way the other lions found out. It just wasn't quite handled as well as I felt that one was, where Scar is just kind of going back to the hyenas. And I think it was Sarabi who said, "You said you weren't at, you weren't there to see what happened, and yet now you're saying this," and that's kind of how they find out. And Scar just slowly moving away to the back of the hyenas, and where he tells them to attack. So that aspect I wish was done just like the animated version. But once the big battle between the lions and the hyenas got going, that I felt was really cool to see, because that was expanded on a little more than the original 94 version did, where we really got to see the lions and the hyenas have a battle, which was really cool to see. Again, look like looking so lifelike, like you're really seeing lion and hyenas go at it. It was just really cool to see. And then you throw in the stuff with Timon and Pumbaa like we got in the original. Rafiki gets his few hits in there with his staff, but no, Bruce Lee imitation.
Yeah.
But all that stuff
was still cool though. Like, and again, they're not going to have him making karate noises and, going all kung fu master on him. But I mean, he whacked a few of them pretty good with his staff. Which again, I was just like, well, why, if you're going to have him do that much with it, why not just give it to him earlier in the movie like you're supposed to have it? But yeah, that was really fun though. And like you said, that whole battle scene was pretty well done. And I agree with you. Like, I wish they had that moment where Simba's got Scar pinned down and he goes, "I killed Mufasa." And even the way that Sarabi was the one to kind of like be like, "Well, hey, wait, you said this, but then you just told Simba this." It made Scar look kind of dumb because he told, I guess he told all the lionesses that, he hadn't gotten there in time to save Mufasa or whatever. And then he goes up to, when he's got Simba backed up on the edge, and he basically outs himself saying like, yeah, I was there when Mufasa died. And I just kind of assumed, I was like, oh yeah, they're all there behind him. But I guess as the audience, we're supposed to assume that he's just saying this to Simba and that they can't hear him, because it would be pretty dumb if he just said that in front of all of them and they could hear that he just admitted that like he watched Mufasa die. That's pretty incriminating. And then sure enough, she's like, wait, why did you just say that? And I'm like, oh, well, okay, I guess they're going that route with it. So yeah, that was one thing that I thought was done better in the original. And then also, so I mean, obviously the big climactic confrontation when the lightning strikes and everything's on fire around Pride Rock, and then Simba and Scar go up to the top of it, and they're fighting. And that was one moment where I was like, okay, finale time, like, don't screw this up, because this has been kind of hit and miss for me so far. Like, this is one thing that you really have to nail. And for the most part, I thought they did, like, because I wasn't sure, with it being more realistic, I was like, that's a really dramatic scene in the original where Simba and Scar are all over each other and they're hitting each other and it's in slow motion and you got the fire behind it and it's really, the just drama and intensity of it is kind of cranked up to 11. And I was a little afraid that they were gonna kind of play it safe or like not go that far. But I feel like they did, especially with the sound design. Like when Simba and Scar are hitting each other, like they had some heavy thuds in there that you could really kind of feel it. It was, a really visceral kind of fight. It was just way too short for me. Like, I thought it was done really well, but then just, they get a couple hits in and then Simba hits Scar and he goes over the edge. And I was like, now again, I'm like, I want to go back and watch the original because it felt like that lasted a little bit longer. Like I wanted a little bit more of it before, he goes over the edge and then, the hyenas are all there and they're like, hey, you said that we were disgusting and you were going to kill us all. And like they turn on Scar and eat him. And that was all done pretty much the same way that it was in the original. So I thought that was well done. But yeah, just Simba and Scar fighting. I wish we had gotten more of that.
Yeah, I think if you were to go back and look at the original, it's probably pretty close to the same length. I don't think that was too long either. But again, it would probably be best if we do an exact comparison to see, because I didn't have the feeling like you did that it was too short, but I overall thought it was handled really, really well. I like that final confrontation between Simba and Scar. The only thing I felt was missing was the way Scar fell off. I do like the flip Simba does to him with his feet.
Oh, right. Well, and that's the thing. See, I had forgotten about that. I was like, I can't remember how that happened in the original, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't like that.
Yeah, to me, that was the only thing missing because it was such a cool shot in the original animated one. But overall, I really liked their final confrontation. And again, it just looks so beautiful once that lightning hit and you got the fire. It just really captured, the cool dramatic setting of that final confrontation between Simba and Scar, and again being so lifelike. It just one of those moments that I was just so into and how beautiful it looked. And even the death of Scar too, it was a very subtle little thing, but I did like it how they made it a little more realistic as far as how it would go down, of a lion being attacked by hyenas, where in the original animated one, you just kind of see the hyenas go to Scar, he's backing away, kind of afraid, and then the camera pans up, and then you just see his shadow with the hyenas jumping all over him. But in this one, Scar gets a few hits in on some hyenas before they all attack and jump on him. So I just like that little added effect where he just wasn't so defenseless and scared and backing away. He actually did his best to try to fight him off, even though it didn't last very long. But just that tiny little thing in detail I really liked. But overall, that whole end sequence I felt was really, really great. And a few moments I wish were kept the same. I actually think this one is a little better than the original 94 animated version, just because it just made it a bigger spectacle in a battle between the lions and the hyenas. I just really, really enjoyed seeing, and just made it feel like a big climactic ending to the story and for the heroes and the villains to have. And even adding a little confrontation between Nala and I think the hyena Shenzi, the main one. That was a cool little thing to add to it too, where this to kind of give Nala adversary and for someone for her to have a fight with as well, I thought was cool. So those little touches here and there made for a really satisfying final confrontation and a final climactic battle with our heroes and villains in this one. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was, I mean, like you said, that battle aspect of it was really good. And I mean, it was nice that they kind of gave Nala a little bit more to do overall in this one. Added a little bit of a rivalry between her and Shenzi, and you get to see them go at it in the final fight, and those couple added scenes that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, overall, I mean, like I said, as far as the climactic confrontation goes, it was all pretty well done. The only thing is, I just wish that Simba versus Scar fight was a little bit longer. And it's not even so much, I wasn't timing it like, oh, the original one was longer. Like I was like, I don't remember. I was like, was it that short in the original? Because this one just felt short to me. But I was like, well, if it was like that in the original, then maybe that's why they did it. But I just wanted a little bit more of that. But it didn't. I mean, that wasn't one of those moments that really disappointed me, just because the stuff that we did get in there was really well done, and everything else around that was pretty good. So, yeah, overall, I was happy with that part.
Yeah, and the final shot of that, ending sequence, where Simba goes to take his place as king on Pride Rock with the rain falling down. Another aspect of the movie that really glad they kept the same was bringing Hans Zimmer back to do the score and using some of his classic themes, especially the music that plays when Simba goes on Pride Rock within the rain. He lets out that roar. I just love that piece of music right there, and really glad it was the same here, and just had that same effect of the original one did, seeing Simba give that big lion roar with the rain falling down and that great music playing, and then it just transitions into the end sequence, replaying the beginning sequence, that circle of life, as the theme of the movie goes. So all that was pretty much kept the same and done really well with having that celebration of a newborn lion cub into the royal family with Simba and Nala's child there. So, and having the movie end the exact same way. It couldn't end any other way. Just like it couldn't begin any other way from the original, it couldn't end any other way as well. So glad all that was kept the same too. With this one. So yeah, that's pretty much the 2019 Lion King movie. It is pretty much a straightforward retelling of the original, with the few differences here or there that we mentioned. Some of them I felt really worked, some of them not so much, and some stuff that we felt was missing that we wish were there. But overall, knowing the story you're gonna get with this one, just as you were with the 1994 original version. So not too much change on that aspect, except a few details here and there. So yeah, so I guess to wrap it up, Kyle, what's your final thoughts on The Lion King for 2019?
I mean, like I said, it still was a little bit of a mixed bag for me. Some stuff that, was just capably handled, or like, okay, they did a pretty good job adapting that. Some stuff that was really well done, especially within the first, opening scenes of the movie. And then, some stuff that I felt like was off the mark a little bit. But I mean, overall, it was still fun. Like I said, it's a classic story that I think if you go see this, and I mean, don't go into it with the expectation that they've radically changed it, and don't go into it with the expectation that it's necessarily better than the original, because I mean, it's one of those things that you can't really top. And this is certainly not a movie that I'm gonna like buy on Blu-ray and watch over and over again. But I mean, I think it's worth watching at least once if you're a fan of the original and just want to see a little bit different interpretation of it and see what would the Lion King look like with real animals. I mean, you might love it, you might be disappointed by it, but I think this was I don't know, it was something interesting for them to try. It's a little bit different because with some of the other live action remakes, it's like, the ones that have a lot of human characters, it's like, well, you can easily envision what that would look like with human actors playing those characters instead of them being animated. But I feel like you can do so much more, especially with animated animals, like making them much more expressive than actual animals would be. And so to a degree, I think that's one area where this was lacking a little bit, especially, like I said, in some of those emotional areas. Like, there's only so much you can do with animating like the faces of real animals and making them expressive and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I mean, it was interesting to see that different take on it, and I think for the most part it worked. Even though the facial expressions and stuff were a lot more subtle, like they still conveyed emotion, they still told the story, and you could believe that these were characters. It didn't feel like those cheesy 90s, Disney movies where you'd have like a live action dog with somebody just talking over it.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, they had full, lip sync and everything. So, I mean, they were believable characters. And yeah, like I said, it was a little hit and miss for me, but it was fun. So, definitely not something I regret going to see. Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say I probably liked it more than you did. I really, really enjoyed it. Again, just seeing this classic story be told in such a lifelike way that I never thought would have been possible watching the original movie, even just a few years ago. I mean, not until Jungle Book came out did I realize that, that could be something that could be done and could be done really well. And I thought Jon Favreau pulled it off as far as doing it really, really well, despite some, complaints and nitpicks here and there over the course of the movie. So I just like having that, option as far as this is a version of The Lion King that I can watch when I feel like it, or I could watch the original animated classic when I feel like it. They both offer different, despite telling the same story, I think they both offer different things that you can get enjoyment out of. The performances are different. Again, the way the songs are handled are different, and just visually, of course, they're different. So it's something that I'm just glad is there, that if I want to see a more realistic take on a really good story, that option is there now, which I think is the case for most of these Disney live action remakes. Just another option for you to have to watch a classic story be told in a different way. So The Lion King, I really, really liked. I think it's actually one of my favorites of these new Disney retellings or remakes for that they've done in the last few years. So I know I'm kind of surprised by the mixed reaction it's gotten, especially on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's like at 60% or something like that. But I guess some people are going in expecting different things from it. But for me, all I wanted was just to experience this story, not expecting a lot of different things or added elements to it, but just be told in this new lifelike way and have it pull up, or have them pull it off where I'm not taken out because certain things doesn't look right because it is CG and I can tell that that's not a real lion or a real hyena. I never had that feeling when I was watching it. It really felt like I was watching lifelike animals talking to each other, and I didn't get pulled out of the movie or experience once thinking that this was animated and they weren't lifelike. So on that aspect, Jon Favreau deserves, and the whole team who animated this movie deserve all the props in the world for pulling that off. So yeah, on that aspect, it's a huge success, and I'm just overall really happy with it. So I'm someone who will probably get it once it comes out on Blu-ray, and looking forward to watching it again once it does come out. So
yeah, it's definitely an impressive technical achievement for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, Jon Favreau, someone who pushes the boundaries on the special effects and technology so much. And we're hearing stuff for The Mandalorian, how they're developing new technology and special effects tricks for that series as well. And he was talking about some of the different techniques they use for The Lion King. So I'm wondering if there's going to be any, parallels, or he's going to use what he's learned on or developed on The Lion King and The Mandalorian. But Jon Favreau is someone who just likes pushing the boundaries and telling this story. So just different ways too, which I love about him. We got something that's fully animated, and now he's moving on to something that's with live action with The Mandalorian. So he's just someone who has his hats in these different areas of storytelling, which I love. So yeah, I guess that's going to do it for this episode of ThunderQuack Reviewed, in this case it being The Lion King. So we thank all of you guys for tuning in and listening to our thoughts on what we thought of the latest Disney live action remake. So we thank you for listening. And as always, you can check us out at thunderquack.com for all the podcasts in the ThunderQuack Podcast Network. And you can support us over at Patreon at patreon.com/ThunderQuack for all the different, you can check out all the different tiers that we have and the different rewards you can get for being a patron. And for those who are patrons, we thank you. So yeah, with that, we'll go ahead and close it out. My name is Tim. If you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter, you can find me at TimG311. And Kyle, where can listeners find you?
At Slim Avery on Twitter.
And as we mentioned in the beginning, we're on the Star Wars: The Saga Continues podcast. And if you want to follow us there, you can go to Twitter and follow us at Star Wars TSC. And we just put out an episode a few days ago, which is our Rogue One commentary, which was a lot of fun. So check that out if you're a fan of Rogue One or just a fan of Star Wars in general. Just some fun discussions going on there. So as always, again, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
And Hakuna Matata.